BLM 2.0, the summer of riots in 2020. Kenosha and Kyle Rittenhouse defending himself with lethal force against a mob of maniacs. January 6th and all of the mayhem and the police pepper spraying and people getting attacked and all kinds of stuff. It's not every day you talk to somebody who has been at all of these things. And yet here we are with our friend Richie McGinniss to talk about that. His new book is here. It's Riot Diet, One Man's Radical Ride Through America in Chaos. Richie McGinniss. And Richie's an independent journalist. He's known by a lot of people on the right for his fearlessness. I mean, let's start with this question, shall we? What was, in your mind, just the most surreal, crazy thing in the summer of 2020 when those BLM riots were just roiling the country? Well, I mean, was Kenosha the craziest night of that whole thing for you? What was the craziest single night when the country seemed to have been gripped by this madness?
I'd say Kenosha was definitely the craziest as far as the level of destruction, just the amount of buildings that were burning, the amount of personal property that was getting lit on fire. Probably the most surreal, though, was Portland. And that was like 100 consecutive nights of rioting. And that was basically the same story of all these other protest zones. You had
to take me into this. Like, when did the rioting start? What were they complaining about? I mean, one thing I thought was fascinating, if I remember, during the BLM riots in Portland, you have all these like Antifa white guys freaking out about George Floyd, right? I mean,
yes.
Take us back into this.
Yeah, so I go through that in the book as well. It's, like 3%, 4% black city that was historically racist. They had laws all the way through the 70s that banned black people from living within the city limits. And after George Floyd was killed, there were protests that every single night followed the same formula. There'd be a protest around sundown, and there'd be speakers. There'd be 5,000 people out there. The overwhelming majority of those people out there with good intentions, and then a smaller group that stuck around. And by midnight, you have 500 people, 800 people who are just smashing into the fence with the express intention of instigating the police and bringing them out from inside the courthouse. They'd be lighting garbage fires in the plaza. They'd be doing whatever they could, firing fireworks into the plaza to bring the police out. And, they were geared up with gas masks. And that chapter is called The Battle of the Leaf Blowers, because they use leaf blowers to blow the tear gas away from the protesters, rioters. It's safe to call them these ones rioters. And the DHS actually got their own leaf blowers because it was so effective. So there were federal agents who were using leaf blowers to blow the smoke towards the protest, and then the protesters were using their own leaf blowers to blow it back. So that was the most surreal moment of just seeing like our, basically law enforcement officers using leaf blowers.
I mean, there's photos. I have some of your footage, and we want to share it with the audience. I mean, stuff like this guy at some of these events, some of these protests, who's dressed up in like an armor suit, like what you would expect from medieval knights and jousts and stuff.
Literally full knights get up, like authentic you'd see at medieval times. And that really gets into the aspect of, how much of this is genuine protest and how much of it is like cosplaying, knowing that the cameras are rolling and actually performing for the cameras that are rolling.
Let me ask you this, because there's so much here and I want to get into it. And also I haven't mentioned or gotten to you yet on the CHAZ issue, right? The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, which was Seattle, right? Where the city of Seattle, people I think just want to forget. They want to forget this now because it's so insane.
They should.
Decided, that a whole section of the city is just like under an independent government of lunatics or something. It was nuts. So I want you to tell us about that in a moment. But first up, I mean, as I look at all of this, there are all these people right now who are in custody still, as you and I talk, for January 6th related offenses. And the one thing that the people who are still clinging to this, it's rule of law, they'll say, well, what about the assaults on police officers? Did you see assaults on police officers in Portland? I mean, did you ever see anybody shove or throw something at a cop? And did they get sent to years in federal prison and have their lives destroyed? I'm guessing not.
No, they did not. And oftentimes you'd see those same people come out literally the next night. And there's certainly the same level of violence against police that I saw in places like Portland and even in DC around when they tried to take down the Jackson statue in late June. There was major clashes with police as they broke that up.
And were you in Portland when they had the federal officers who were there who were a problem that came up? I remember reading about this, so I'm wondering if you were when they were trying to blind them with the lasers. This became a new thing. They were shooting lasers in the eyes of people, hoping to burn their retinas so they can't. Doing this to law enforcement.
Yeah, they had lasers, and I was there right when the first Molotov cocktails were used as well. And they were not only shooting fireworks, but also using Molotov cocktails. I was filming from afar and saw this firebomb explode. And later on in the night, one exploded in a massive fireball right in front of the courthouse. And to my knowledge, there were Molotov cocktails that were recovered inside the park. But as far as arrests that were made for the people who threw those Molotov cocktails on that night, there was nothing.
So just to be clear, you witnessed times where a Molotov cocktail, which anybody who knows the history of it, used in the counter assault against the Russian invasion of Finland, and they called it a Molotov cocktail because of the foreign minister Molotov of Russia at the time. And they threw them at the cops, though, or they just threw them in like the street? Did they ever actually deploy them at officers?
They did. And the first one that I captured blew up like right next to some cops. It was a smaller fireball then they put it out. And what they would do is bunch up inside of the plaza behind their shields. So that made them kind of an easy target. So that one blew up right next to them. And then another one later on in the night blew up right in front of the doors right before they exited. So, and then there was a viral clip like a couple weeks later where actually one of the rioters threw a Molotov cocktail and lit one of the other rioters' pants on fire. So as far as like actual injuries to officers, they were wearing protective gear. They had gas masks and all that. I'm not aware of like serious injuries that took place, but they were certainly trying. That's for sure.
And who are these people who are doing this stuff to the degree that you can people that are dressing up and, they got their gas mask and their shield and I guess they live in the Portland area or maybe they're somewhere else in the Pacific. Why is also the Pacific Northwest like the homeland of these lunatic anarchists or whatever and Black Bloc and all this? Like, take me through some of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the people who were out there, I think generally, obviously, were disaffected, mostly younger people, especially when you compare it with the MAGA crowd, which is a much older demographic overall. But, a lot of these people actually didn't live in Portland. Same with Kenosha. They came from surrounding metropolitan areas, and they came there because they knew that was the hot spot where it was going down. And Portland and Seattle are traditionally kind of these hot spots where not only left-wing agitators, but also the Proud Boys. That's really where Gavin McInnes is based in New York. He started the Proud Boys, but their primary location of instigation, you could call it, was Portland. So it was not only like that you had these extreme demonstrators rioting for dozens of nights on end, who were mostly like your typical, I think, kids without, opportunities who live in their parents' basements. But then you also had the Proud Boys coming out to counter protest. And that's a different situation entirely because they're proud. So you know who a Proud Boy is. But if you ask somebody if they're Antifa, in the book I call them the umbrella gang, because nobody's going to tell you, oh yeah, I'm Antifa. They wear all black. They're specifically not designated as Antifa, whereas the Proud Boys wear the black and gold shirts, and you can, it says Proud Boys on there. So umbrella gang was the term that I used to describe them, but generally just younger kids who feel like they don't have opportunity, and that's their cause.
You were at Kenosha, which turned really into, for most people's minds, the Rittenhouse incident where Kyle Rittenhouse defended himself using lethal force against a couple of assailants, and they tried to lock Kyle up for this, and he was found not guilty. I think in part because of, or large part because of, some of the footage that existed showing what happened and showing the exchange. I want you to tell us about that in a second, but first up, look, for the fellow gun owners out there, it's time to get yourself some of the best firearms made in this country these days for the absolute best price. That's what you have with Bear Creek Arsenal. I was in their factory in North Carolina earlier this year, and these are gun guys and gals, and they're all about making sure they give you the best value, best crafted firearms you can get absolutely anywhere. I've got the Grizzly, for example. That's my handgun from Bear Creek Arsenal. It's 9mm, feels great in my hands. Very similar in a lot of respects to the Glock 19, but got a few extra things added to it to make it a little more aerodynamic feeling, a little more comfortable in the hands. So get yourself a Bear Creek Arsenal firearm today. Go to bearcreekarsenal.com/buck, bearcreekarsenal.com/buck. They're direct to consumer, so it saves you money, provides you convenience. Take 10% off your order with coupon code BUCK, bearcreekarsenal.com/buck. All right, take us in. We're speaking to Richie McGinniss. Riot Diet is his book for anybody who is joining us kind of in progress here. Riot Diet is the book. Tell us this. What was it like that night leading up to the lethal force self-defense of Kyle Rittenhouse? What was going on in Kenosha?
Well, we arrived on the second night of rioting. So Jacob Blake, who started to kick the whole thing off, he was trying to enter a vehicle which had his kids in it. There was a warrant out for his arrest for the sexual assault of his baby mama. She called the police when he arrived at the house and told them that they had to get down there, that she was afraid for her safety and her kids' safety. And he was entering a vehicle. And just like everything else during that summer, you had a video that was taken out of context where he can be seen wrestling with police trying to enter the vehicle, and he'd shot. And the narrative that came out was that he was shot 7 times in the back. It was 4 times in the side and 3 times in the back, or 3 times in the side and 4 times in the back. And he actually was armed with a knife, according to police, and also was trying to enter into a vehicle which had kids inside of it. And so the narrative was that he was shot in front of his kids. What wasn't said was that he was armed with a knife. He had a warrant out for his arrest. He was tased twice before that video started. And then he was shot after that. So that kicked off the whole thing on Sunday. We arrived on Monday. And actually, the reason why I ended up interviewing Kyle Rittenhouse 13 minutes before the shooting was because the car source business that he was defending, the night before that, Shelby Talcott and I, who's my coworker, we were out there traveling to all these riots and stuff. We interviewed some individuals who were using power washers to put out the fire, the vehicle fires that were in front of this car source business. And so the next night I saw on Twitter, I went inside to publish my footage of everybody getting pushed out from in front of the courthouse where they were protesting. And as they started to light things on fire in the surrounding business areas, I saw that there were armed individuals in front of that same business. So I was like, this is an extension of the story that we saw last night. We had the volunteer fire brigade, and now we have the volunteer cops out here. And so I immediately dropped what I was doing and I went out there, and the first person who was standing right in front of that business was Kyle Rittenhouse. And I just said, does anyone want to do an interview about why you guys are here? That was kind of our job, is just ask people, why are you out here? What do you think you're doing? And he told me, he had his EMT pack, said he was a trained EMT, which turned out to not be true. But he also had his rifle. And so he said that he was providing medical attention to protesters who had been injured by riot munitions, but also defending the business with the rifle. So I actually followed Kyle through it was like basically a dispersed riot at this point, where there were a couple hundred protesters who had been pushed away from the courthouse. And I noticed immediately he was, shouting medical. Does anyone need medical attention? Obviously, he had the intention of helping these people, but they didn't view it that way because they saw his rifle. And if it had been my younger brother, I would have dragged him out of there at that moment. But my job was to be a fly on the wall. And so, I noticed that people were perceiving him negatively. And actually, I went to interview a couple of people. There were 4 guys who were standing there yelling at him, yelling at Kyle, "You think you're in a movie, man? You think you're cool?" So I went to interview them, ask them why they, didn't view Kyle's role in that situation as positively as Kyle viewed himself. And I aimed the camera at them. One of the guys had a handgun in his waistband. He stood up. Another guy had some bricks in his hand. He looked like he wanted to smash my head. And I used my go-to move to diffuse the situation. I put my phone away. I was like, I just want to hear from you guys. Does anyone want a White Claw? So I actually, this is now 4 minutes before the shooting. I offered a White Claw to the guy with the handgun, and then he actually laughed. It broke the ice. We started to talk as I cracked it. And then I saw Kyle running down the street with his AR in one hand and a small fire extinguisher in the other, literally running. So I just dropped what I was doing. I was like, sorry guys, I got to go. And I followed Kyle down the street and called my coworker Shelby. I said, something's about to go down. I don't know what's going on. That was literally the moment that Rosenbaum emerged from the side of the street, screamed at Kyle. Kyle started to run. I thought I took a video. I took a photo of the ground, it turns out. And I was running behind Rosenbaum, who was chasing Rittenhouse a pop went off that I didn't know at the time, but it was a gunshot. And Kyle's turned around. He had his gun aimed 45 degrees towards the ground, and Rosenbaum screamed "F you" and dove for the weapon. Kyle dodged and shot 4 shots in like 0.7 seconds. And the last thing that was, interesting about my role in the whole thing was that I told the police that I looked down at the moment of the shooting and didn't see him collapse, Rosenbaum collapse, because I felt something go past my legs. And so they took what I said, looking down, feeling something go past my legs, and made me a victim in the case as well. And I didn't ask to be named a victim, but there was a weird juggling act where I had my best friend's dad, who's a criminal lawyer. He was like, "You can have them pull back the charges and not be a victim anymore. You can ask for that, but then you'll be deemed as a biased witness who's trying to help Kyle, and that'll actually make your testimony less credible. So you actually the best thing to do is just ride it out." And so I had to go through the process of being both a key witness and a named victim. And it's possible in Wisconsin, you're acquitted of self-defense, but charged with reckless endangerment of another individual. So I was terrified personally that, he would be acquitted on all charges except for the 12 years, that the maximum, that sentence that was associated with my victimhood, I guess.
Wait, so one of the discharged rounds when he was defending himself went past your legs.
Yeah, and actually the FBI released surveillance footage from a Cessna that they were flying overhead. Not until a year, people were saying he's lying, that didn't happen, but they had an infrared camera up above the protest, and you can see the heat signature of the bullet right in front of me in that footage. So, I knew that I felt something. That's why I looked down and I stamped my legs to make sure I was okay. So I think maybe it was like a piece of concrete or something that skimmed past my nylon pants. But I guess that raises another question of if the FBI had a Cessna overhead, why was the city allowed to burn and be destroyed in the way that it was?
Where were the police during all of this?
Well, they were guarding the courthouse, and the National Guard was present as well, and they were guarding the courthouse. But the police in Kenosha, like in DC, this never would have happened because DC cops, they know what they're doing. Obviously, January 6th is another story, which we can get into.
We're going to get into that in a minute. Yeah. Go ahead.
But they weren't prepared for it. They didn't know how to do riot control. And once they were, they're defending the courthouse, but they weren't defending the small businesses that were surrounding the area. So this, those 3 nights in a row of just wide scale arson throughout the city.
Well, let's go to J6 here coming up in a second. But first, our sponsors, the IFCJ and the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, appreciate so much that in the times of hardship over in Israel, the allies that Israel has in this country have stepped up and stood with them. And the Israelis who have received this benefit, this help, are thankful for the food and basic assistance, truly life-saving aid when the rest of the world in the Middle East seems to have turned its back on them. Your gift of $25 will help provide a food box to an elderly Jew or a Jewish family who are suffering and in desperate need. A gift of $100 will help provide 4 of these life-saving food boxes. This season, please consider standing with Israel and the Jewish people. Support ifcj.org to make a gift now. That's where you go. Support ifcj.org or go to 888-488-IFCJ. All right, Richie, now take us to January 6th. What'd you see? What happened? What do we need to know?
Okay, well, I guess the story of January 6th obviously starts with the election. I was on the ground in D.C. for the election night. Obviously, things weren't resolved on that night. And I was there for Stop the Steal 1, which you saw thousands of Trump supporters come to D.C. and they were wearing their red hats. And as they left the ellipse area on that first Stop the Steal, they went kind of haplessly through BLM Plaza, which is kind of like walking through BLM Plaza with a MAGA hat is like walking into a hornet's nest. But most of these people were from, around the country. They didn't know what they were walking into. So we filmed a variety of assaults on people who had MAGA hats. And the second Stop the Steal in December, the Proud Boys came in force because after all that footage of MAGA people getting beat up and assaulted, they basically came to, I guess, give it back to them. And so we saw like widespread like medieval style street battles in downtown DC at Stop the Steal 2 in December. And so by January 6th, like I had, this is after Kenosha too, so I had my bulletproof vest, my bulletproof backpack, my bulletproof helmet, and my gas mask. I thought everything was going to pop off around dark as it had with the previous two. So I was at home where I had internet. I was streaming the Trump rally. I had 5 people on the ground where such a big crowd, and maybe they were using jammers too, who knows, but nobody had cell service down there. So I was waiting until later to go down, and my now wife, then girlfriend, was on the top of Rayburn, which is a house office building, and she was like, I see cops running in opposite directions. This is at like 1 p.m. And I was like, okay, if that's it, then I guess the poop has hit the fan quicker than I thought. So I geared up. I was in the Uber with literally putting my bulletproof vest on, putting my gas mask, adjusting it so it fit with my ballistic helmet. And I hit traffic, and I brought my skateboard knowing I was going to hit traffic. And I skateboarded down to the Western Front where the inauguration tower and all that was. And this is about now just after 2 p.m. And my first thought when I got down there was, why is it that I'm better prepared than almost all of these cops? So I had my gas mask, and I'm walking in between the two sides clashing. A lot of the on the MAGA side, they had pepper spray. The cops had pepper spray. And so as each side got pepper spray, they'd be running away. And I was just standing in between. You know, my hands were burning a little bit, but I was able to see and able to function because I was prepared. And I climbed up into the inauguration tower and filmed the breaking of the police lines. And then once I saw them streaming in, I was like, same as the BLM stuff, I'm not going to trust the feds or the cops to tell us what happened. I'm not going to trust the protesters to tell us what happened. My job is to go in there and get in the middle of it. And I ended up on the other side of the house doors where the sergeant at arms had their guns drawn. And that famous photo of the guy sticking his face through the glass, I was right behind that guy. So I thought maybe I was going to get caught in the crossfire yet again after Kenosha. Literally 8 minutes later, the cops finally peeled everybody off those doors. They got reinforcements. I went into the rotunda, and there was a guy who had rolled a joint and was smoking a joint. So that just shows like the scope of, you know, one side said it was totally peaceful. The other side said they're all insurrectionists. It's the same as the BLM stuff. The overwhelming majority were peaceful, but there's a small group of people who were, trying to break into those doors and get into where the votes were being counted. So both things can be true at the same time.
Did the FBI ever come knocking on your door and try to ask you a lot of questions about this?
Well, it's interesting. I have had at the time congressional press credentials, so I was allowed to be in there regardless of whether or not there was a riot taking place.
Oh, interesting.
But they did not, and I thought that they would because, you know, I published my footage. But you know, you have to think that they're going to ask me, do you have anything else? You know, do you have anything else in your phone, or do you have any? Like we were in a bunch of different group chats with like Proud Boys, Telegram chats. You know, so like, how was it that through, you know, my own intelligence gathering, I was better prepared than the police were on that day, and knew that there was going to be violence. That's a question that I still don't have the answer to. But
Did you have any sense from the people who were there that they were concerned that some of the people who were either in the run up to this or during it, getting the crowd hyped up, might have been plants? Is that something that ever came up among the discussions with, you know, these people, these Telegram chats, etc.?
Definitely. And Ray Epps was there the night before. And that video actually came up in one of the chats. Remember, he was saying we need to go into the Capitol. That was on January 5th. And actually, I didn't realize until after the fact, but as I was walking down the line, Ray Epps is in my footage. He was right at the base of the inauguration tower, and he actually left right as everybody was breaking the line. So he walked away right as I got to the bottom of that tower and climbed up. But there were, I mean, dozens of different interactions where people were screaming, stop, stop. You know, so some people were smashing into police shields and fighting with the cops and pepper spraying them. And a lot of others were saying, guys, we have to stop this. What are you guys doing? So there is this like Lord of the Flies effect that I call it, where, you know, it only takes 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 in a huge group of people to start banging into police. And once the pepper spray comes out, once the tear gas comes out, a different part of your brain turns on. You see a guy with a MAGA hat get billy clubbed down to the ground, and you turn into a primal person, you know. And I think, especially like in the modern day, we're not in touch with that side of the human psyche. But when that kind of stuff happens, you're not thinking anymore so much as just running on primal circuitry.
Our sponsor here is Sabre, which is all about protecting yourself. Interesting, given what we're talking about here. Sabre lets you layer your personal defenses. For example, Sabre driveway alerts let you know when someone's approaching, paired with floodlights to deter them. Sabre's door security bars reinforce your front and back doors, stopping up to 650 pounds of force to secure entry points, even when you're not home. And if you are home, many home invasions happen at night. Sabre's home defense pepper launcher is the ultimate choice to protect yourself and your family that is non-lethal. Sabre projectiles hit hard, causing intense pain, and it's still effective if you miss because they create a 6-foot pepper cloud spray. Richie, pepper cloud spray, right?
Yeah, I can confirm.
You don't want to be caught in a pepper cloud spray.
I've been hit by many pepper balls. And it's not
right.
Fun.
It's not fun. You don't want to. I mean, that slows you down, and people think twice, and they want to get the heck out of there. Sabre's home defense launcher is the only 68 caliber launcher with a 7 projectile capacity, offering up to 40% more shots. Stay secure day or night with Sabre solutions. Go to sabreradio.com, SABRE radio.com. That's sabreradio.com, or call this number, 844-824-SAFE. That's 844-824-SAFE. Richie, this has been fascinating. I already have my copy, obviously, here, Riot Diet. I would tell everyone listening and everyone watching, please go get their copy as well, these stories. I did a little side note here. When I came out of the CIA, and I wasn't looking to do media, and I got hired by Glenn Beck to do national security analysis for The Blaze. And the first thing, though, where I got to kind of do reporting or, going out was Occupy Wall Street. And people think of Occupy Wall Street as just this kind of weird, like, hippie fest down in Zuccotti Park. And there certainly was that. And, but I was also there when they cleaned that thing out and the cops were like throwing people around and pepper spraying everybody and kettling everybody. I was there for some of the Antifa, anti-cop things that kind of broke off of Occupy Wall Street during that. People forget Occupy Wall Street, Zuccotti Park was like the hub, but there were other events, they would meet up in other places in the city and do this madness. And black bloc guys, I remember, NYPD guys throwing them on the ground and pepper spraying people and stuff. There was some mayhem going on with that. So that was, I don't know, it was interesting stuff to see at the time. And obviously it grew and grew to the point where you were looking at this stuff. It got to, some of the biggest events in our recent sort of political and domestic history involved some of this stuff. So really interesting to hear you.
Yeah, and that's why they came out and supported BLM, all the big corporations, because after Occupy, they said, well, if we don't want them, if we can't beat them, join them, right?
Interesting. So I hadn't really even thought about that. Yeah, because originally it was all about. It wasn't really about Wall Street. It was more about sort of corporate and bank bailouts, right? I mean, it's funny because as you know, Wall Street, they were in Zuccotti Park, like. Wall Street now is basically a tourist attraction. There's some stuff down there, but actual banking is really in Midtown Manhattan. That's where all the big banks' headquarters are now, except for a couple. There's like Goldman downtown, a few others. But yeah, I'm just wondering, it feels like a lull right now. I want to close with this. Feels like a lull in the left-wing, street soldier shock brigades, right? Haven't seen a lot of Antifa. We got a Trump inauguration coming up. What are you hearing? Like, we didn't see the riots after the Trump win yet, but are we going to see riots? Are they waiting for the deportation stuff to begin and they're going to start getting all anarchist radical over that? Like, what do you see? Or are they taking a breather here? I mean, they don't have day jobs, so what are they doing, Richie?
Well, it definitely doesn't benefit if the incumbent party has chaos under their watch. So I think the inauguration is when that stuff's going to kick back off because Trump's back in power. And if you have chaos under Trump, then Trump looks bad. Then he brings in his National Guard or DHS troops, and then he's the fascist that they all want him to be. So I think definitely we'll see protests, inauguration clashes with counter protesters and inauguration goers. And then I agree. I think with all of the immigration stuff, there's going to be a whole powder keg of different issues that people are going to be going nuts about.
So these lunatics that you've been covering for years now, and they're not done, is what they're not done.
I don't think I don't think it's done, unfortunately.
Are you going to be at the inauguration?
I will be. I'm trying to retire from this whole riot beat because, I'm trying to, I'm getting a little old.
Yeah.
Plus, if people recognize you, that's a big issue too.
Yeah.
But I will definitely be out at inauguration, and
All right.
we'll
Well,
see how it goes. We'll play
save a
it by ear.
gas mask for me, buddy, because I'll be there. And Riot
Yeah.
Diet. Here you go. The book.
There you go. I got you.
Thank you. It needs to be extra large. I got a big head and a lot of hair.
Yeah, me too.
So,
me too.
yeah, absolutely. Richie, great work, man. Congrats on the book, and thank you for joining us here on Buck Brief. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Buck.